murder charges filed in a bizarre case after this man's body was discovered in a local reservoir.
On May 15, 2026, a work crew near the Dog River Reservoir in Douglasville, Georgia, made a discovery that would change everything. Human remains, dismembered, pulled from the water along a quiet stretch of Highway 166, just 30 miles outside Atlanta. No name, no face, no answers. For weeks, investigators had nothing but a body and a river full of questions. Was this a robbery gone wrong, a random act of violence, or something far more personal, something hidden behind a smile someone trusted? It would take a father's grief, a recognizable tattoo, and DNA science to finally answer the first question. Who was this man? His name was Jamal Rashad Parker, 37 years old, a bartender, an artist, a musician, a son who was loved and who, according to those closest to him, loved harder than almost anyone they knew. But identifying Jamal was only the beginning. As investigators dug deeper, they didn't find a stranger's crime. They found a web connecting a home, a couple living inside it, and a girlfriend who claimed to know nothing, until the evidence said otherwise. By the time the dust settled, 4 people would be sitting in jail, all charged in connection with Jamal's death. 4 people, according to his own mother, who may have lured him into a trap he never saw coming. This is a story about betrayal, about a family's unbearable wait for the truth, about a girlfriend accused of helping cover up the very crime that took her boyfriend's life, while publicly pretending to grieve alongside his family. And this is a story that is still unfolding. No trial has happened yet. No one has been convicted of anything. Everyone charged in this case is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty in a court of law. Before we go any further, hit subscribe and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. This case is still developing, and I'll be covering every update as it happens. Now, before we get into the suspects, the searches, and the twist that added a 4th arrest to this case, you need to know who Jamal Parker really was, not as a headline, as a person. Jamal Rashad Parker was the kind of person people describe in superlatives, a beautiful soul and spirit. That's how his uncle, Daryl McCoy, described him in a fundraiser set up to help the family cover funeral costs. Not a good guy, not well-liked, a beautiful soul. Jamal worked as a bartender at MS Icy's Kitchen and Bar in Atlanta. If you've ever spent time around bartenders, you know the good ones aren't just pouring drinks. They're listening. They're reading a room. They're the person a stranger opens up to on their worst night, and the person regulars come back to see, specifically by name. That was reportedly Jamal. His family says he enjoyed creating new drinks, treating bartending less like a job and more like a craft. But bartending was only one piece of who he was. Jamal was also a visual artist and a musician. He created. He performed. He put pieces of himself into the world in more than one form, which tells you something about a person, that they weren't content to just get through life. They wanted to add something to it. His uncle's tribute put it simply. He loved life and the people he met along his journey in life. That's the kind of language you hear from a family that isn't performing grief for an audience. That's the language of people who are genuinely gutted. And they had every reason to be. Because of the condition Jamal's body was found in, his family couldn't even hold a funeral right away. Think about that for a moment. Most grieving families get to say goodbye. Jamal's family had to wait for identification, for release, for some version of closure that wouldn't come easily. His funeral was eventually held on August 15th at F.L. Sims Funeral Home in Mableton, Georgia, 3 full months after his body was found. 3 months of not knowing. 3 months of a father hearing his son's voice in his nightmares. Jamal's father, Charles Parker, said, "I can hear him calling me. I can hear him calling his mom." He said he prays his son didn't suffer. Jamal's mother later spoke about the toll of losing him too. "Every day I think about him," she said. Every day. This wasn't a man who disappeared into obscurity. He tended bar in Atlanta. He made art. He made music. He made people feel welcomed into whatever room he was in. Think about the sheer number of strangers who passed through Jamal's bar over the years, the regulars who requested him by name, the people having a rough week who found, for 20 minutes at a time, a bartender who actually listened. Multiply that by every shift, every night, every drink he crafted instead of just poured, and you start to understand the size of the hole his death left behind, not just in his family's life, in a community. That's what makes cases like this one so different from a statistic on a nightly news broadcast. Jamal Parker wasn't an abstraction. He was a working Atlanta bartender with regulars, with a family who adored him, with art hanging somewhere and songs he'd written that his loved ones can still listen to. And somewhere between leaving his everyday life and ending up dismembered in a reservoir, something went horribly wrong. So let's talk about what we actually know and what we don't. Authorities have not publicly disclosed the exact date Jamal Parker was killed, nor have they released the official cause and manner of death. What we do know is this. His body was discovered on May 15, 2026, in the Dog River Reservoir, located along Highway 166 in Douglasville, about 30 miles outside Atlanta. The remains were dismembered. That detail alone told investigators this wasn't a straightforward case. Whoever was responsible didn't just want Jamal gone. They wanted him unidentifiable, and for weeks it worked. Investigators had a body, but no name to attach to it. No missing persons report had immediately connected. The sheriff's office and state investigators were left working from physical evidence alone, trying to reconstruct a human being's identity from what remained. The break came from an unlikely place: a tattoo. Jamal's father came forward and told authorities that markings on the recovered remains matched tattoos he recognized on his own son. That single detail, a father recognizing his child's ink, gave investigators somewhere to start. From there, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, or the GBI, used DNA comparison technology to confirm what the tattoo suggested. On June 15, 2026, exactly 1 month after the remains were pulled from the water, Jamal Rashad Parker was officially identified. Now investigators had a name, and a name meant a life to trace backward, his last known movements, the people he'd been in contact with, and ultimately where he had been before he died. That trail led investigators to a home on Langdale Chase in Douglasville, Georgia. Deputies spent 4 days searching that residence. 4 days is not a quick evidence sweep. 4 days suggests investigators believed strongly that this house held the answers to what happened to Jamal. And what they reportedly found leaving that home turned stomachs across Georgia. Investigators were seen carrying out a reciprocating saw and cleaning supplies. A reciprocating saw, cleaning supplies, from a home connected to a man whose body was found dismembered in a reservoir 30 miles away. You don't need a criminal justice degree to understand the implication investigators were working with. This wasn't a home invasion or a robbery that spiraled into violence outdoors. This was, according to the pattern of evidence, a home turned into something far darker, a place where investigators believe Jamal Parker was killed. The house on Langdale Chase belonged to a woman named Brittany Amber Baker, age 42. And it's here that the case stops being about a mystery victim and starts becoming about the people investigators believe are responsible. Consider what that search represents from an investigative standpoint. 4 days inside one residence means detectives, forensic technicians, and evidence teams were combing every room, every drain, every surface, looking for anything that could confirm what they already suspected. In cases like this, investigators are often working against time, against decomposition, against a suspect's attempt to clean a scene before anyone comes looking. The fact that a reciprocating saw and cleaning supplies were reportedly recovered tells you a cleanup effort had already been attempted, and had already failed to erase what mattered most. Because it wasn't long after that 4-day search that authorities made their first arrests. If you're new here, this channel breaks down real cases using verified reporting, no speculation, no clickbait theories. Subscribe so you don't miss the next update, because this case is far from over. This case didn't end with one arrest. It ended, so far, with 4. Let's go through them one at a time, because each one adds a new, disturbing layer to what investigators believe happened to Jamal Parker. The first arrests came in June of 2026. Deputies took Brittany Amber Baker, 42, and Mario Andre Barber, 46, into custody and charged both with murder. Baker is the resident of the Langdale Chase home, the same home investigators spent 4 days searching, the same home where the reciprocating saw and cleaning supplies were recovered. Investigators believe this residence is where Jamal was killed. At the time of their arrest, authorities had not confirmed publicly whether Baker and Barber knew Jamal personally. But Jamal's uncle wasn't waiting on official confirmation. He wrote that his nephew was brutally murdered by people he knew and trusted. Both Baker and Barber pleaded not guilty and are being held without bond. Reports indicate both have lengthy prior criminal records, though the specifics of those records, and how, if at all, they relate to this case, have not been detailed by authorities. Jamal's father didn't mince words outside the courthouse. "I want them to be punished," he said, "and I don't even think a life sentence is good enough. It's the kind of stuff you see on TV, but I mean, they had no remorse." That's a father who has seen the evidence, or at least enough of it, and walked away certain of what he believes happened to his son. If Baker and Barber were the first gut punch, the third arrest was the twist nobody in Jamal's family saw coming. In July of 2026, nearly a month after the first 2 arrests, investigators arrested Ambria Boyd, age 35, of Stone Mountain, Georgia. And here's the detail that stopped an entire family in its tracks. Boyd was Jamal's girlfriend. She was charged with murder, making false statements, and obstruction. Here's what investigators say Boyd was doing in the weeks after Jamal's death, while his family was still searching for answers. Investigators say Boyd came forward during the investigation, claiming that an unknown caller had given her the name and phone number of the person responsible for Jamal's murder. On the surface, that sounds like someone trying to help, a tip, a lead, except investigators say it wasn't true. They determined the name Boyd provided was false. And it gets worse. Investigators allege that Boyd was actually friends with the person they believe is the real killer, and that she had been staying at that person's home. On top of that, authorities say Boyd was with Jamal a few hours before he was murdered. Let that sink in for a second. The woman who came forward pretending to help identify a suspect was, according to investigators, personally connected to the very person she claimed a mystery caller had named. One warrant tied to her murder charge described Boyd as, quote, "a party to a crime that ended Jamal's life." For Jamal's father, this detail didn't just complicate the case, it shattered something. He said Boyd had appeared to be genuinely grieving alongside the family. "She's been corresponding with Jamal's mom like she didn't know what was going on," he said. Imagine exchanging messages of comfort and shared grief with someone, only to learn later that investigators believe she knew who killed your son the entire time. Boyd's attorney has publicly denied all of it. Absolutely nothing to do with it, he said. She's 100% innocent. He said he is confident she's going to be exonerated, and noted that at the time, Boyd had not yet been indicted, and no judge had found probable cause in the case. He also confirmed Boyd is a mother of a 9-year-old boy and said she's sorry for Jamal's death, while maintaining she had no role in it. Boyd later launched a fundraiser to help cover her legal defense. That decision infuriated Jamal's father. "Ain't no way in the world somebody in their right mind would want to back a person for doing what they did," he said. He went further, suggesting that anyone who donates to her defense fund needs to be questioned too. Just when the case seemed to have its full picture, authorities added one more name. David Davant Barber was arrested and charged with felony murder, malice murder, felony battery, and aggravated assault. Investigators confirmed one critical detail. David Barber is Mario Barber's brother. Two brothers, a girlfriend, and the woman whose home became, according to investigators, a crime scene. For months, one piece of this case had remained a mystery, even after 3 arrests. Authorities had not publicly named who they believed was the actual primary killer. The arrest of David Davant Barber on the most severe charges in the case, including malice murder, may be the answer to that lingering question. But even that hasn't been officially confirmed by investigators as, quote, the central figure. What we do know is prosecutors now plan to bring charges against all 4 suspects directly to a Douglas County grand jury, bypassing a preliminary hearing altogether. That's the suspect list as of now. 2 men, 2 women, 1 home, 1 reservoir, and a family desperate to understand why. Here's where this case takes its most gut-wrenching turn. Jamal's mother spoke publicly about what she now believes happened to her son, and it's not a robbery and it's not random violence. She believes he was lured. My son did not know the Barber brothers, she said, but she noted that the brothers were friends with Ambria Boyd, Jamal's girlfriend. Read that again. If his mother's account is accurate, Jamal had no prior relationship with the 2 men investigators now believe carried out, or helped carry out, his murder. The connective tissue between Jamal and his alleged killers wasn't a business dispute, a drug deal, or a stranger crossing his path at the wrong moment. It was, allegedly, his own girlfriend. That's the detail that transforms this from a tragic, violent crime into something that reads like a betrayal on every possible level. If investigators are right, Jamal wasn't killed by strangers who happened to cross his path. He was, according to his mother's belief, brought into a situation by someone he trusted completely, someone who was with him a few hours before he was murdered, and who was personally close with the man now charged with malice murder. And through it all, Boyd was allegedly playing a second role, the grieving girlfriend, corresponding with Jamal's own mother as if she too were simply waiting for answers. There's another thread buried in the investigative record worth mentioning. Authorities have not clarified the connection between the murder charges and separate fraud charges that were reportedly filed earlier against some of the individuals involved. That detail hasn't been fully explained publicly, and it raises the question of whether financial motives, not just personal ones, may have played a role in what happened to Jamal. As of now, that thread remains open, and we'll be watching for updates. What we do know for certain is this. The investigation escalated methodically. First, a 4-day search of a single home, then 2 arrests. Then, weeks later, a 3rd arrest that blindsided the victim's own family. Then a 4th arrest that finally brought the most serious charges in the case, malice murder, into play. That's not the pattern of a case that was solved overnight. That's the pattern of investigators building a case piece by piece, following evidence as it led them deeper into a circle of people who all, in some way, knew Jamal Parker. Prosecutors have now confirmed they intend to present the case against all 4 suspects directly to a grand jury, skipping the standard preliminary hearing process. That's a significant move. It signals prosecutors believe they have enough evidence to move straight toward indictment. For a family that had already waited 3 months just to bury their son, that shortcut might be the first sign that the legal process is finally starting to move at the pace their grief demands. But make no mistake, this case is not over. It's not close to over. A grand jury hearing is not a trial. An indictment is not a conviction. Every person named in this case is legally presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. Boyd's attorney maintains she is completely innocent and expects her to be exonerated. The other suspects have also pleaded not guilty. Nothing about this case has been decided in a courtroom. What has been decided, at least in the mind of one grieving mother, is who she believes is responsible and why. Continue to pray, she said, and justice is definitely being served. Get 'em all, she said. I want everybody to pay for what they did to my son. So where does this case stand right now? As of the most recent reporting, all four suspects, Brittany Amber Baker, Mario Andre Barber, Ambria Simone Boyd, and David Davant Barber, are being held without bond in jail. Prosecutors have announced their intention to present charges against all four directly to a grand jury, bypassing a preliminary hearing. That means the next major step in this case will be whether a grand jury formally indicts these four individuals, which would move the case toward trial. No trial date has been set. No convictions have occurred. The cause and manner of Jamal Parker's death have still not been publicly released, and the full narrative of what happened inside that home on Langdale Chase, the exact sequence of events, who did what, and why, remains something only the people involved and the evidence investigators have gathered may ever fully explain. What we do know is the emotional wreckage left behind. Jamal's father has spent months oscillating between grief and disbelief. He couldn't hold a funeral for his son right away because of the condition of his body. He's had nightmares about hearing his son's voice. He was blindsided to learn that the woman he thought was grieving beside him, his son's girlfriend, was allegedly connected to the very people accused of killing him. And he was outraged to see a fundraiser launched on her behalf, asking the public to help pay for her legal defense. I want them to be punished, he said, and I don't even think a life sentence is good enough. Jamal's mother has held onto something closer to faith that the system will work. Every day I think about him, she said. Every day is a different day, but she made her position clear. She wants everyone connected to her son's death to face consequences. Get 'em all. I want everybody to pay for what they did to my son. And then there's Jamal's uncle, who tried to put words to a loss that resists language. Jamal was a beautiful soul and spirit, he wrote. He loved life and the people he met along his journey in life. That's the person this case is actually about. Not four names in a jail log. Not a procedural update about grand juries and preliminary hearings. A 37-year-old bartender who made drinks people came back for. An artist. A musician. A man his family says brought joy wherever he went, and whose final months were reportedly spent trusting people who, according to the charges now filed against them, played a role in ending his life. If you've made it this far, here's what we're going to keep doing on this channel. Following this case exactly as it unfolds, exactly as verified reporting confirms it, not rumor, not speculation, not comment section theories. When there's a grand jury update, you'll hear it here. When there's a trial date, you'll hear it here. When there's a verdict, you will absolutely hear it here. Because Jamal Parker deserves more than being remembered as a headline about a reservoir. He deserves the truth. Fully surfaced, and whatever justice the legal system is capable of delivering. And for anyone watching this who has ever lost someone to violence, or who is currently sitting in that same excruciating limbo, waiting on a grand jury, waiting on a trial date, waiting on a justice system that moves at its own pace regardless of how urgently a family needs closure, please know you are not alone in that wait. Cases like this take time precisely because the stakes of getting it wrong are so high. That's cold comfort when you're the one waiting. But it's also, often, the only path that leads to a conviction that actually holds up. To Jamal's family, his father Charles, his mother, his uncle Daryl, and everyone who loved him, we see your grief, and we hope this case brings you the answers and the accountability you're still fighting for. Rest in peace, Jamal Rashad Parker, a beautiful soul and spirit gone far too soon. Now it's your turn. What do you think really happened inside that home on Langdale Chase? Do you believe Ambria Boyd is telling the truth about her innocence, or do you think the evidence against her tells a different story? And when this case finally reaches a grand jury, do you think justice will actually be served for Jamal and his family? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and I'll be back with updates on this case the moment new information becomes available. If this video moved you, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next.